The quarterback position, though, who's it going to be? We know Castellanos is coming on Wednesday for a visit. We know that On3's predicted he's going to transfer to Florida State. That I know many people will roll their eyes about that, but you've got to get that right too. And I would say this: if it is Castellanos, he's only going to be a junior. So that also, like Kromenhoek might have been willing to sit behind somebody for a year, but not 2 years. So if you're willing to bring in Thomas Castellanos, who's a redshirt junior, well, you're basically telling these guys, yeah, if things go according to plan, you will not play. This is not just a 1-year rental. If it's Castellanos, it's potentially a 2-year rental with an option to buy, and then you've got to absolutely figure out this position. And we'll see. It's going to be really, really fascinating. But it's maybe the biggest story of the offseason is who the quarterback's going to be.
Yeah, I don't know.
Moving forward.
Yeah, I think it always was going to be. And Castellanos, I think I think he's a good fit. I listened to you and Aslan talk on Wake Up, and you were making it was almost like you had to defend the position that Castellanos would be better right now than Kromenhoek or Brock Glenn. And I'm like, Corey, you don't have to defend that.
Hey, buddy, if I'd have known what was going to happen today, I would have thrown Kromenhoek to the wolves as soon as I started talking. Like, screw that kid, screw that traitor.
That was not my point. I don't think anybody, the people who don't want Castellanos because they're comparing him to, this ideal of what they could get.
Yeah.
The idea that you're going to get somebody that, is somebody that's going to be a great fit for this offense and also is an extremely accurate passer who's also been productive, it's probably pretty slim. Now, I also don't know that if you get Castellanos, I don't know that you have to be done then. Like, I don't know that you have to just say, okay, we're set at quarterback.
I wouldn't be.
Or you go and try to get somebody else. And if you do that, then, now you could be in business in a much different situation than you are right now. If you had asked me a week ago or 3 weeks ago, as soon as Gus Malzahn was hired, whether or not Luke was going to be the starter in 2025, I would have thought it was less than 10%. I just didn't think that was going to make sense, especially not for this year. So
yeah,
it's not as shocking to me, but obviously the reaction is people feel like, this is a major tipping point.
They remember though that, the way that Georgia made a run at him at the end of his recruiting cycle.
Right.
And they remember there's a moment, I think about his first pass, which should have been a touchdown pass, but of course it was dropped against Duke. And you see the arm talent there. You see the other running throw that's a laser in the middle of the field to Ja'Kai. That's a great throw. You see samples of the tools that he has, and you're like, oh, man, that projects nicely. But to your point, it projects nicely in a different system. It doesn't necessarily project nicely in Gus Malzahn's system. And I thought the second that they made the decision to go to Coach Malzahn, he was gone. I said on the air, in my opinion, there was zero chance he would stay. Mm-hmm. So, it's not surprising, but it's also not surprising for people to be upset because, unfortunately, while Mike has done some really good things here, he's whiffed on some areas. Developing quarterbacks is one of them. And so they see this as yet another guy they were excited to bring in.
And that's fair.
And they're never going to get anything out of him. And they're like, okay, again, we're going to keep starting over again because, Mike, when the hell are you ever going to do anything with a quarterback? And that's fair, but it doesnit mean you're not in the predicament you're in.
It's fair, but yeah, that's all my point is the circumstances changed dramatically. Now, maybe if Luke Kromenhoek was never going to turn into what people thought he was going to be, then that would be a fair criticism. Right now, once you went in this direction, to me, this was going to be a pretty likely reaction. It's still, I get it stinks. I just don't know that it changes really the outlook on Florida State football in 2025.
Honestly, I think if
unless you have an exodus of players from that class.
I just think that next year Kromenhoek wasn't going to play. So I don't – not in this offense. I just don't think he was going to play. So I don't think it changes the 2025 season one iota. It sucks that your highest-rated quarterback recruit that Mike Norvell has ever signed is gone after a year. But, yeah, man, that's the world we live in. And the beauty is Gus Malzahn has won a lot of games and put up a ton of yards with Thomas Castellanos types. Nick Marshall wasn't a very good quarterback throwing the ball, traditional quarterback. John Rice Plumlee at UCF was not a very good traditional quarterback. He does it with guys that can move, and he gets passing yards out of them, but they're basically glorified running backs that can throw. Castellanos fits that bill. He has done this before, and it's worked really well, and that's the hope you have moving forward. And whether it's Castellanos or Trevor Jackson or Brock Glenn.
Or
You
if they
have to
bring
hope that
somebody else.
Malzahn is a guy that can get a quarterback to fit his system and move the ball and score points.
Well, that's what you invested in. There's no getting around.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you decided to do. And once you did, this was inevitable, in my opinion. And also, once you went 2-10, you were going to have some moments that stung in the offseason. And you're going to see some of that play out. But that's the reality of a season like that and a decision like the one they made, which they had to do.
And real quick, Hank in the chat said it's not just about 2025. It's about the sustained winning beyond this year. I normally would agree with you, except not in this situation. Everybody from Mike Norvell to this coaching staff, to the president, to the AD, to the trust, they have to win this year. I'm not saying win the national title, but it can't be anything remotely close to what it was this year because there's so much crap that needs to get done. They have to win in 2025.
Gary writes, was a little surprised to hear that Castellanos will be visiting. What are your thoughts about him? I think he's a fit for the system that Gus Malzahn wants to run. That's the sole reason, Gary, that they're looking at him, is that he fits that offense almost to a T.
And one thing I want to bring up real quick, because a lot of people brought this up. I know Corey and Aslan talked about it yesterday or today on Wake Up, and I'm sure you guys did yesterday on the JCS. I listened to parts of it. I didn't listen to the whole thing.
It's okay. You're busy. It's the middle of the day.
But if they, you
were also on the show yesterday.
I also was, yeah. The concerns, I understand people's concerns about him quitting on his team this year.
I didn't love
obviously
that. Didn't love that. Yeah.
Nobody does. But I would say this. If the fact that Gus Malzahn, who had him on campus for a year, and then he transferred out and left, is willing to bring him in, like he's got more knowledge about Thomas Castellanos than any of us do. So you got to believe that if they were concerned about him being a guy that's a bad guy in the locker room or a quitter, that they have to feel good about that to make this decision. And we don't know enough about what happened at BC. Again, Bill O'Brien coming in there, NFL coach, or at least, recently an NFL coach, you just don't know how that situation was handled. They got benched and what led to it. I'm not saying I'm defending it, but I do think the fact that this isn't them blindly signing a kid that may have this big red flag. Malzahn has a really close relationship to him, and Norvell recruited him.
Do you think that Norvell and Trayshawn Ward still have a good enough relationship that Norvell would actually reach out to Trayshawn and be like, hey, man, can you give me the skinny on what happened and what kind of teammate he is? Do you think that's even a possibility?
I can see that.
It'd be a great decision, and I think I'd make that call, Corey.
Yeah. If they haven't done it, they should.
Well, especially because all three of us respect Trayshawn Ward.
Yeah,
a lot.
Respect who he is as a competitor, as a player, and as a teammate. So I would value his opinion greatly, and if he had good things to say, that might help assuage my fears because it is a bad look. It's not ideal, and it does make me raise an eyebrow at the very least. I get why fans are like, man, I don't know. But to your point, Ira, that was a good point you made. Gus knows him better than any of us know him. So but I'd love to get to the bottom of it. We never will.